Ladies and gents, PepperBelly here, and I'm bringing you guys some more Star Wars Battlefront beta gameplay. This particular game was literally insane for me, because I took the AT-ST and I went on a crazy ass tear, and then of course, got in the AT-AT and then started melting more face. It was kind of great. I mean, in this particular game, I went 74 and 8, so kinda like destroyed the crap out of the rebel scum. It was very satisfying. But of course, this brings up one thing I want to discuss, which is another issue I have actually with the vehicles themselves, specifically the AT-ST. The AT-AT also has this issue, but since it's on rails, it lacks one of the problems as well, which is basically movement. And you'll notice it in this particular gameplay as well. You'll see the AT-ST getting stuck on the most insignificant objects that wouldn't normally stop an AT-ST. Now, an AT-ST, if you guys aren't aware of, it stands for All-Terrain Scout Transport. Well, it's not very good at traversing terrain when it's an all-terrain vehicle, because a little tiny cliff is what stops this thing from, like, stepping down or moving around the world. It's a very, very annoying. I don't know why it's a big issue. Like, right here, I try to continue running forward, and it's like, oh, this tiny little cliff that's, like, a meter high I can't traverse it. I have to go back and go around, which is just, like, why is that a problem for an AT-ST? It shouldn't be, right? This thing is an all-terrain vehicle. It should be maneuverable. It should be able to get things done and kill stuff if need be. But anyway, the bigger issue here in my mind would be the fact that aiming isn't always lined up properly. Again, this has to do with perspective. If you watched my last video from yesterday, you'll know I was talking about third-person perspective when playing as infantry, and how scoped weapons were kind of off-center, like the camera was in a different position when you were scoping in versus being in first-person. The issue is still there when you're using either the AT-AT or the AT-ST, where if you zoom in, it won't always land where you're shooting, which this is actually kind of a good thing in one kind of way, which means the rounds are originating from the barrel itself. When you're firing your blasters or your lasers, they're coming directly from the barrel themselves, so the camera being propped up a little bit higher over top of the vehicle when you're firing, you may be able to see what's on the other side of that piece of cover, but from the gun's perspective, it can't. It can only see the cover, so when you're trying to shoot over it, you're actually going to shoot at the cover, hitting it, which is a little bit of an annoyance because it's obviously harder to engage things because of the way the perspective works, which isn't too much of an issue. But I mean, somehow alleviating that in a way, I don't know exactly how you would tackle that problem, but alleviating that in some way would be nice because it's just kind of annoying. I think one way of fixing it would be to do the same thing that fighters have, which is the ability to go into first person in the cockpit view, because the cockpit view in the fighters allows for more accurate shooting of both the missiles, the rockets, whatever you're using, and your lasers. So if you want to do a strafing run on a target and fire the rockets, you're going to want to go in first person because the perspective of firing rockets in third person is actually completely different, and you can actually end up missing the target altogether, even though your crosshairs are aiming directly at the target you're trying to hit with the missiles. So it's kind of weird. Perspective and third-person mechanics are very strange in this game. Obviously, this is something that needs to be worked on, but allowing for first-person in an AT-ST would be not only more immersive and kind of epic, but it would allow for more precision shooting, because you'll actually see the trajectory of where the rounds are going to go, instead of having this crazy sixth sense of, like, everything around you, and being able to see, like, everything because of third person, you know? Like, third person's, like, obviously more advantageous, because you got more field of view, meaning you got more understanding of the area around your troop versus first person, which is obviously more constricted to the FOV you have set. But either way, it's still pretty fun. But I mean, I really would like to see those things addressed, just because the game would be that much better. I mean, it would just help with a lot of the little tedious nuances that can kind of detract the overall gameplay experience. And like when I get in the AT-ST, you're going to see it like tenfold, where you're trying to engage things, but it's like you'll miss entirely. Like, it'll either land below the crosshair or it'll land above the crosshair, depending on which trajectory you're trying to shoot at. So it's very inaccurate, it's very unpredictable, and it's really hard to, like, for me, what I end up usually doing is watching where my lasers land, and then you kind of walk them into the target, like you would do in real life with a machine gun if you're firing over long ranges, with tracer rounds, etc. The same kind of idea, because all lasers are visible, right, in this game. So you kind of just walk it into the target, which isn't really a bad thing. I mean, obviously it makes it so it's not as overpowered, because I imagine if you were able to hit the mark every single time, people would be pretty pissed because they would not have any room to maneuver whatsoever. And I guess it also kind of makes it feel more movie-like when you're shooting and you kind of see the rounds missing because, hey, Imperials don't know how to shoot. but apparently in this game they do, except for when you're in a vehicle or you're in a third person and your perspective's all shifted. So, I don't know, minor thing, getting it fixed would be nice, but I have no idea how that's going to be addressed personally. Like, either way, I'm fine with the game, it's still fun, but little things like that is what can kind of annoy the average gamer out there who's really used to the idea that where my crosshair's pointed, that's where my rounds are going to land, even if they originate from the barrel. And I'm hardly the first person to complain about this, because there's lots of talk about how inconsistent shooting from a vehicle is, even though it kind of seems like it's somewhat like it balances the game because of how powerful they are. But I mean, in the end, we all know it's not really intended. I mean, they could say it's intended, but I could tell you it's probably not, because who intentionally makes things inaccurate, not landing where you're shooting? Like, you know, it's, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, the video is coming to an end, guys. It's been a lot shorter this time around, which is a good thing, I guess you could say. Anyway, my name is PepperBelly. Thank you guys for joining me today, and I will see you guys on the next one.